Are you looking for a folder that's small enough to carry easily but robust enough to stand up to just about any task? The Vosteed Hedgehog might be just what you're looking for. With its premium materials, fidgety action, and robust lock, it arguably punches way above its price point. And today, we're going to take a look and see if it lives up to that hype. As always, if you enjoy these reviews, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And I'll have links to where you can get your own Hedgehog down in the description. With that out of the way, let's get into it. So, specs and materials, the first spec, and probably the one that most people are interested in, is the price. Now, this will range from $129 to $139, depending on the scale material that you choose. My particular model was $129. And what do you get for that? You get a 2.99-inch modified sheep's foot blade, and it has what I would call a high saber grind, because you can see the grind doesn't go all the way up to the top. It kind of stops here before it gets to the fuller and the section up here. So I would call it maybe a saber grind or a high saber grind, depending on how you want to define that. And the blade also has this kind of a harpoonish spot here. I really don't know what else to call that, because it's not really a true thumb ramp, but it kind of reminds me of like the harpoon blades. So I'm just going to call it a harpoonish spot. The total blade length is 7.11 inches, and the blade stock is 0.138 inches. So it's not a super thin blade stock. It's also not the chunkiest blade stock that I have, but it's a decently thick blade stock. And the steel is S35VN. Now, mine has a satin finish, but you can also get it in a bead blasted or a black stonewash finish, depending on which scale material you go with. And speaking of scales, the one that I have here is it is a blue and black. They call it Damascus, so it's kind of like a Damascus micarta. I absolutely love it. I really love this design. I thought it looked really, really cool. And actually, I specifically was looking for this one when I was shopping for mine. It is also available with a variety of aluminum and micarta scales. So if you prefer those scale materials, they do have an option out there for you now as well. And actually, I believe the aluminum ones are part of the newer batch, and we'll get to that. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. And the hardware, the screws, the pocket clip, everything like that is all stainless steel. So specs out of the way and the materials, let's get to the Ergos. Now, the Ergos are where the Hedgehog really shines for me. And it has multiple methods of deployment. So my favorite is going to be the thumb stud here. I can get a really good flick on that. It also has a flipper tab here. Now, I'm usually not a big fan of flipper tabs. However, this one, it is so like kind of low profile to the knife. It really doesn't, rub against anything in my pockets, but it's also really easy to access because it has some jimping on it here. So it's very easy to get a purchase on. And just a really, really good option. And if you wanted to, it has this fuller here that you could use. I've used that to flick it out before. I don't think I would use it over either of the other two methods, but it is an option as well. And speaking of the jimping up here that I talked about on the flipper tab, you also have, I guess, I don't know if I would even call it jimping, because it is a very widely spaced kind of jimping there. But you have that where you can index with your thumb, and you also have the little harpoon spot that I mentioned before, which is really great as kind of a thumb ramp to get a good purchase on that. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is the grip, and you can kind of see how I was choking up here, and that's one of the things that I really like about this knife. So choked back, I can get what I would call a 3.5 finger grip on it. You can see my pinky. It is still resting on this, but it's on this angled portion, so it really doesn't have a good grip on that. But I really never use the knife like that. Choked up gives you a lot more control. So you can choke up into this finger choil, which is very generously sized. I have fat fingers, and it is very secure for me. And with that, I'm getting a really, really solid 4-finger grip on this. And you can see your thumb kind of naturally comes up into that little harpoon spot. And it is just so, so comfortable for cutting like that. Now, the G10, it is smooth without being slick, if that makes sense. Like, it definitely isn't rough or anything, but it has just enough texture. And I think it has a little bit more texture on the button side, or the show side, I guess this would be, since you have the pocket clip. It has a little bit more texture on this side, and I'm not sure if that was intentional or that's just kind of the scales that I got. But it also has this kind of checkered section down here, and I don't know how much it really helps with grip. It is where your fingers sit, so you probably do get a little bit of extra grip off of it, but I think as just kind of a visual thing to break up the scales of the knife, I really, really like that. So overall, as far as ergos go, I would have to say that this handles like a bigger knife than it actually is, but that's in a good way. It's not that it feels bigger than it is, so it's harder to carry. It handles bigger, so it feels easier to handle than most small knives, because sometimes small knives can be difficult to handle just because you can't get a full grip on them. So the next thing is the lock and the action. And the lock is actually the single reason that I bought this when I originally bought it. And that is because it was one of Vosteed's first knives to use their top liner lock. And so if you're not familiar with that, it's essentially a button operated compression lock. So when I go to close it, you just press this button down here. And what that's doing, you can see there is the lock bar there. And when you depress that, sorry, let me get a good angle on it. Press that down, blade drops, and drop shut like that. Now, the thing that's really cool about that is you are getting the convenience and finger safety of a button lock, which is a huge thing for me, but you're also getting it with the strength and reliability of a liner lock, as opposed to just a like spring plunge lock that you see on a lot of cheaper button lock knives. Now, the other thing is with the mass of the blade, thanks to the fact that it is a hefty blade, it shoots out with authority when you flick it out and you open it. It is, I think, probably one of the most fidgety knives that I have in that regard. It just is so, it feels so great to flip that knife out. And it also, as you can see, it drops shut without issue. And that is one thing that I think is really cool about this, is that I have never had to adjust the screws on, or the screw, I guess, on the pivot. A lot of knives that I get to get them perfectly drop shut the way that I want them, with no blade play, but also drop shut, I have to sit there and tweak the screws for a while. I did not have to do that with this knife. It was perfectly drop shut from the factory, and it just was tuned perfectly when I got it. So, honestly, it is one of my favorite actions on any knife that I own. So, carry and practicality. So it's certainly not lightweight with the heavy blade and everything. Not heavy blade, but kind of a thicker blade, chunkier blade, I would say. It is robust, but it's also not overly hefty either. It's kind of a mid-range as far as the weight on this for me. It's also not overly thick when you're looking at it from the top profile like that. It's not going to be a super thin knife like, say, the actually, it's probably pretty similar to most knives that I own. So yeah, I was trying to come up with a super, super thin knife, but I just don't buy a lot of thin knives. So we'll just go with that. Now the pocket clip is deep carry, which is a huge deal for me. I'm going to bring in the good old pocket and belt simulator here. And you can see it goes down very deep into the pocket. You really can't even tell that there's a knife in the pocket, probably, unless you're looking for the pocket clip. And I just absolutely love those deep carry clips. It is not quite small enough to fit in the fifth pocket, at least on my jeans here. It gets pretty close, but not quite fifth pocketable in that regard. Now, the modified sheep's foot blade, it won't do a lot for you as a piercing blade, but it's really not designed for that. So you kind of know what you're getting with that. But it will excel with things like cutting cardboard, opening boxes, and things like that. Despite its fairly thin blade stock, I've actually found that it slices through cardboard really, really well. And the shape is kind of vaguely reminiscent of a utility blade when you kind of look at it. But obviously, no interchangeable blade like a utility blade, but it just kind of generally resembles the shape you get out of a utility blade. So, on to build quality. I already talked about the steel, but S35VN is a solid choice for a steel. I wouldn't mind seeing other options in something like maybe an LMAX or an M390, or I actually think a budget version in like a Nitro V, a 14C28N, or a 154CM would be awesome. So Vosteed, if you're listening, think about that. And the finish on the blade is really even. There's no imperfections. This one might be smudged up a little bit, but that's because I actually use my knives. And it has kind of a complex grind here with the fuller and kind of the different shapes here and not coming all the way up. But really, even with that, I don't see any noticeable imperfections in the blade. The G10 G-Mascus scales on mine feel and look great. I'm going to bring that up to this close up for you again. Just really love the design on those. And I think it's like really, it's attractive. It is noticeable without being flashy is the way that I like to put it. And the blade came well centered. Like I said, didn't have to adjust it at all for centering or any of the other things. And as I mentioned, I never had to tweak the pivot on this, which I cannot say that about many knives that I own. So all of that said, on to the pros and cons. So the pros for me are going to be solid materials. It has good steel and good scale materials and options for scale materials. The Ergos are awesome. It allows you to choke down or choke up depending on how you want to use it. It is very fidgety, as you saw. Like, I just can't stop fidgeting with this knife when I have it on camera. The snappy action is also drop shut, so you're getting the best of both worlds when it comes to that. And with the deep carry clip, it is super, super carryable. Now, the cons. The sheep's foot blade is not great for piercing, but you kind of know that you're getting that with the sheep's foot blade. There is only one option for steel, and so in the spirit of Henry Ford, you can have any steel that you want as long as it's S35VN. And the aesthetics of the design is one of those things that you will either love or hate. I love it, but the blade shape and just the overall design with the fuller may not be for everybody. So, that being said, let's get to some comparisons. And first, I'm going to bring in the two of the button-operated compression lock knives that I own, and that is the Spyderco Sage 6 and the Vosteed Porcupine. So this is kind of a younger brother of the Hedgehog here. You can see very similar in size. Really, I would say almost in the identical size class, really. And you're looking at, really, this is kind of falls in the middle price-wise, with the Porcupine coming in at, I believe, the $70 to $80 range, and the Sage 6 usually falling around the $200 range, maybe a little bit less if you can find a good deal on it. But these are two really good competitors in different price ranges that use the same kind of lock. And next, we're going to bring in two of the more popular competitors size-wise, and that is the Benchmade Mini Bug Out and the Spyderco Para 3. Again, you can see pretty close in size. The Mini Bug Out is smaller than both of these for sure, but all pretty similar size class. But those are two pretty popular knives, just if you have those to compare it to. And last but not least, we have the Kizer Drop Bear, the Kershaw Bel Air, and the Demco AD 20.5. So again, pretty similar in size on these. And one that I wanted to compare it to on the blade stock is the Bel Air. You can see a very noticeable difference in the thicker blade on the Vosteed Porcupine. But those are some more comparisons that are kind of in that same size class. The Bel Air and the Drop Bear kind of in the premium models that I like, with this that I have, that's a 20 CV, they kind of come in a similar price range. The Demco I bought similar price range, but it usually runs higher in price. So with all of that said, the ultimate question is, would I buy this again, and would I recommend it? As far as would I buy it again, if they offered it in different steels, oh, I took it out. What am I doing? If they offered it in other steels, I would probably buy it. Right now, just because all they offer is S35VN, I probably wouldn't buy another one. But if I were to look at it and I didn't own one, definitely I would buy it. And I wouldn't hesitate to recommend this one. The fact that it is under a 3-inch blade and therefore legal across the majority of the US is a big selling point. And despite that, like I mentioned, it also handles like a bigger knife, and it has definitely earned a place in my EDC rotation. Now, in fact, this is actually one of my favorite folders, and the only reason I hadn't shown it to you sooner is the fact that it was out of stock almost everywhere for a good while. And they're back in stock now, though, so I wanted to bring it to your attention. But what about you? Does the Vosteed Hedgehog have a place in your pocket, or is this the design? Is the design on it a little bit too out there for you? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. And until next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next video.